welcome to Newsclick. We have with us today Professor Salil Misra from Ambedkar University, a professor in history, and we're going to discuss with him the politics around the ban of beef. Salil Saab, welcome to Newsclick. Why are we suddenly hearing all this talk around the beef ban again? Considering there was already a Cow Protection Act way back in 1976, I think, in Maharashtra. And what this beef ban does, and actually in large parts of India, what you're getting in the name of beef is actually buffalo meat. So why this sudden need to introduce the beef ban?
I see two reasons for it. If it was just a question of food habits or imposing a kind of a code of eating or trying to standardize food stuff and ways of eating, it would still be bad, but it would not be so worrying. What is much more worrying is that this beef ban or eating of beef or not eating of beef, I suspect is connected to certain larger projects. It's not just food for its own sake. It's food which is being projected as a cultural symbol. Right. Now, the thing is that there have been various forces that have been trying to impose certain kinds of disciplines, or let's say there has been a homogenization project almost since the beginning of the 20th century of two kinds. One is that there is this great search to create an idealized Hinduism, Hindu religion. Now, Hinduism, as you know, is an extremely complex religion. It's extremely plural. There is no single god, there is no starting point, there is no founder, culturally very plural, linguistically very plural, all kinds of cultures and groups have flourished and all. Now, there has been this attempt to try and homogenize Hinduism, try and create one ideal type standardized Hinduism. These efforts have not succeeded, but these efforts have been made. So, to try and create certain sacred important symbols uniformly shared of Hinduism, and because cow at some point in history, we will discuss later, came to be established as a sacred symbol of Hinduism. Therefore, beef related to cow, sacred cow, and so it is being projected as a template of idealized standardized Hinduism. That's one project. So, to create one ideal type of Hinduism with some strong identifiable symbols. The other equally, this is worrying, this is bad enough because I like Hinduism in its plural form as it is. The second thing is a kind of a coercive project in which those who are not Hindus sending disciplinary signals to them that they must conform to certain types of standards, conducts, eating habits, etc. in according to certain principles or norms which have been created, which means a coercive homogenizing project. So, there are two types of coercive homogenizing projects, one within Hinduism and the other at a national level, those who are non-Hindus, to send strong symbols to them, to fall in line, to conform, to cater to these existing norms, both of which are extremely worrying. As an Indian, as a liberal person, I should be very worried by, and I am worried by this.
Exactly. So then I guess it's right to say that one has to look at this in a slightly larger context. Say, on the one hand, you're seeing Ghar Wapsi and you're seeing this whole propaganda around love jihad, and it's probably just an extension of that kind of attempt at homogenizing Hinduism and sending a message to minority communities, a coercive message. But the first part of the argument that you made, which was that ultimately Hinduism is also a religion which is plural, which is not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. So, within Hindus also, there are several communities that have been eating beef for time immemorial. Isn't that the case?
Absolutely. If you go to the history of Hinduism, I'm not, one would have to go back to ancient India. I'm not a historian of ancient India, but there are instances, there are practices of beef eating, etc. At some point among pastoral communities, because of cow and the significance of cow, it became an important symbol. It became a source of wealth. So, cow was established as a wealth. In pastoral societies, this would be treated as wealth, and over time in certain pockets, there was a kind of, so beef came to be banned, and there were groups within Hinduism which completely gave up eating meat, and they became dominant groups, and as you know, that then becomes the dominant culture. It was, and by the way, when the Turks and the rulers, Mughals came, they also respected this practice, and meat was more or less not very much in practice. In Punjab, for instance, in the 19th century, meat was really banned by Ranjit Singh and others. They banned the eating of cow meat. The ban was lifted by the British when they took over. And then in Punjab, in the late 19th century, after Arya Samaj was formed, Arya Samaj created cow protection societies, Gorakshani Sabha, and that move was extremely successful. By the end of the 19th century, something like 180 plus cow protection societies had been set up in various parts of North India. So, a lot of this consciousness, this sacralizing of the cow does not really go back in time in a very seamless kind of way. It is very much, it was there, but in 19th century, there was a new focus on treating cow as the sacred symbol, and there was these societies were set up. Just one more thing, interestingly, I have to bring Gandhi here. Gandhi had a very interesting position on this. Gandhi, as you know, he called himself a Sanatan Hindu. He had great faith in Hinduism, and he had great respect for the cow. He treated cow as extremely sacred. He said cow is sacred, but he was completely opposed to these cow protection societies. And he said in his Hind Swaraj that cow protection societies, Go Rakshani Sabhas, should actually be called cow killing societies, Go Bhakshani Sabhas, because through their intransigence and excessive insistence on protecting the cow, that attitude leads to lot more cows being killed. So he said, if I were to save a cow, I would try and persuade my friends, my Muslim friends, my other non-Hindu friends, Christian friends, they will listen to me, and through we can have an understanding, through a dialogue, we can really solve this problem. And he lived up to his words. During Khilafat movement, there are empirical examples that because there was tremendous Hindu-Muslim cooperation, instances of cow killing actually came down.
Interesting.
So Gandhi said this is not central to the problem, this is an aspect, it's a manifestation of the problem. Real problem lies deep down. So Gandhi, who was a great Hindu, Sanatani Hindu, respected the cow, treated the cow as sacred, he had extremely innovative ways of looking at this question, and he did not practice, he did not share the politics of cow protection societies. He was extremely critical of them.
That's a very interesting point, and that, like, I think that also sort of in many ways reflects what you were saying, the heterogeneous society or heterogeneous nature of the religion, and how different people also who may consider it a problem actually approach the problem also differently. But at the same time, I mean, if one is to look at communities that do consume beef, and it's the second point that you made in response to my first question, about how there is this kind of coercive code that is being enforced on communities that don't necessarily subscribe to a Brahminical notion of Hinduism.
Very much.
A lot of Dalit communities may not, if they were beef eating, but at the same time, a lot of them, especially the Jatav communities in North India, have been part of the trade that is involved in the cow skin, in leather and so on. At the same time, the beef eating communities also, it's also the cheapest form of meat that is available in the market today. And at the same time, it is also, there is a whole economics around the production and the sale of beef and cow meat, or not cow meat, but buffalo as well, and bullocks and buffalo, and so on and so forth. Can you talk about that a little, and how it's actually, and do you see this then as a direct attack not just on the social and cultural aspects of communities other than the Brahminical Hindus, but also on the economic aspects and the basic survival issues for a lot of people outside this fold?
Very much. It has an economic aspect of it, and the economic aspect is that you would, if this move were to become successful, you would find people in pastorals, people would be very reluctant to rear cows, to maintain cows, because it will become completely unviable for them. The milk producing period is slightly short, and after that, so there are going to be a whole range of economic implications of it, plus the fact that for certain groups and communities, this is a source of food, cheap, inexpensive food. But much more than economics, what I find really worrying is that there are these, it affects the nature of Indian nation and Indian nationalism. Indian nationalism itself is very plural. just like Hinduism is very, very plural, which means that it cannot rest on one symbol, one culture, and so on. Now, the communal forces, they don't call themselves communal, they use the word cultural nationalism. They call themselves cultural nationalists, which basically means that the Indian nation should be based on a single culture, single code, single sacred universe. Now, all that itself is very worrying, because that's a complete negation of the manner in which Indian society has evolved, of the very USP, DNA of the Indian nationalism. Indian nationalism is not based on a single culture or a single language. It's not like European countries. The whole strength of Indian nation and Indian nationalism is its variety, its plurality, multiple ways of organizing life, multiple ways of eating, multiple types of food, and so on, and all of them coexist within this umbrella called Indian nation, and that must persist. And there are very dangerous, very worrying signals that all these moves are going to, if they were to become successful, they would affect the very nature and essence of Indian nation, and thereby Indian society, thereby India. So it's very anti-national, anti-society.
That's a very interesting point, because anti-national is the term that they often throw at anyone.
This is anti-national.
This is anti-national.
Yes.
Absolutely. And at the same time, I think what's also happening is that there is a government which is now beginning to decide what film we will watch, what books we will read, what food we will eat. It's not as if it's not happened in the previous Congress regimes, but the extent to which we're seeing this kind of coercive code that's being enforced on people is obviously new for and the scale at which we are seeing it. But at the same time, what's also interesting is that a lot of the protests against this kind of imposition of what you will eat, especially in the context of the beef ban, a lot of the opposition is not necessarily coming from, let's just say, that one would expect that the Muslim community in India would oppose it the most, but it's actually coming from a whole cross section of society. And in fact, yesterday, the example in Shillong, where it was, I think, very embarrassing for the BJP president and the way people responded to the protests. So, where do you see, do you really see this protest coming from a cross section of society? And Dalit groups have protested against this in such a big way in so many parts of the country as well.
I am a little bit optimistic. I don't think coercions of this kind will work beyond a point. They are self-defeating. Indian society, the nature of India, it's very complex society. There was a time when there was dominant Brahmanism, that it worked in the sense that it existed, but it was not able to change very many things, and there was a lot of resistance to it, the Bhaktist movements and the Sufi movements. So Indian history is a very interesting history of ideas and counter ideas, protest ideas also developing. So coercion has not worked very, very much. There is something about the DNA of the Indian society. There is a sense that people want their spaces, their freedoms, and so on. So I think there is going to be a lot of opposition to all such moves when you are going to be dictated from the top that wear this, eat this, read this, do not read this. When all these things happen, they might work for a little while, but in the long run, the protest and the opposition is going to come from extremely unusual kind of quarters, because by and large, people do not like being dictated to. And I think if there is an onslaught on this, there is going to be resistance, and from all kinds of quarters, as you absolutely rightly pointed out. It is going to increase.
On that very optimistic note, thank you so much, Salil Sahab, and we'll hope to discuss similar issues with you time and again on Newsclick. Thank you.